guys. So, today we're going to be taking a look at some stocks that I'm both watching and some that I already own that I'm maybe looking to add a little bit to. So, I'm just going to be flipping through a couple here. I probably won't spend too much time on each of them, but I'll pull up the first one here. I just have my phone off to the side with the list so I can pull them up as I go. So, the first one we have here is Nano Dimension Limited, ticker NNDM. So, this is a very small company. Currently has a market cap of 2.5 billion, which you may say, oh, that's not too small. However, this was what most people would consider a penny stock not even a couple months ago. So you can see, looks like it really started to take off here around October, but September and before September, it was around $1.50, which would probably make it about a tenth of the size it is now, and that means it was about a $240 million market cap, which makes it a penny stock. So, what this company does is they do additive manufacturing for circuit boards and other electronics. So it's kind of like, think of a 3D printer, but they make electronics. So this allows them to have very, very precise manufacturing. I first found out about this because Kathy Woods, the fund manager for the ARK Invest funds, spoke on them and also has invested some of their money in them, albeit a pretty small amount. You can see that it does have a negative earnings per share of $1.48, which isn't great considering it was about that in stock price a couple months ago. It means they're essentially losing the value of the share every year. But this is a pretty speculative play. I got in around the $8 to $9 mark here, so I have a little bit of a cushion built in, and I kind of just threw some money in there just as kind of like a bet on additive manufacturing for electronics kind of taking off in the next couple years. So, next up, we have Cloudflare. So, again, not a profitable company. These are kind of the more riskier, high potential but also higher risk stocks that I have on my watch list. You can see they're close to making a profit. They're at negative 72 cents a share EPS for the trailing 12 months. So you can see they're inching up, and they've been increasing their revenue every year. And they are a $25 billion company, or at least that's what their valuation is at. So, pretty big company here. So Cloudflare is a website hosting, and they offer DDoS protection and a lot of these other online services to host websites, servers, anything of that sort. I am into computers, but I'm not too much into the network and all network side and all that, so I'm not going to pretend to know their entire business model. But I do use them to host one of my websites, or at least to provide protection for one of my websites. So I love their product. They're very reliable, and a lot of people use them. And I think it's just an industry that's going to continue to see growth with the amount of websites that keep popping up, the amount of cybersecurity issues we're having, and we will have going forward, and then just the rise in e-commerce and the demand for online security. Next up is Lemonade. This is a disruptor also this is considered like an insurtech. So to me, like the best analogy I can think of is it's like if Robinhood made an insurance platform, both like an app and a service, because the site looks phenomenal. It's very similar to Robinhood. They have a lot of nice graphics on their site. They're into the whole cartoon simplistic, high contrast colors, and it's very user oriented, as a nice user experience, and that's kind of what they're playing off of. So, looks like they don't have earnings data for this company, but I can tell you that I'm 99% sure they also do not make a profit. Let me just pull it up on my phone here. They don't have data for it either. That's interesting. It's probably because they haven't had a full 12-month period. I think they just IPO'd not that long ago. Yeah, June. So they haven't even been around for 12 months, which is probably why I can't calculate the trailing 12-month EPS. But I bought most of my shares around the $50 mark in here. I've been slowly buying up here, and I haven't really bought anything past 120. I'm kind of content with where I'm at, but there's been some pretty harsh pullbacks. You can see it went from 182, let's see here, 183 or so, and it's now at 153. So I've been keeping an eye on this. Citron, their big short seller, put out a report on them saying that they expect that they think that the stock should be way lower, and that actually caused a lot of commotion, which I was kind of surprised by, but not enough to drop it down into where I want to buy more, but we'll keep an eye on it. Yeah, you can see they still haven't updated the price target, which is kind of funny. $86. I don't think it's been that low in like a month or two. Anywho, moving on. Next up is Pershing Square Holdings, or PSTH. This is Bill Ackman's SPAC. So this currently does not have a target. If you guys are familiar with SPACs, they're just blank check companies that go through all the hassle of going public. And then once they're public, they have a set amount of funding that they raise initially, and they take that money and use it to buy a stake in an already established company that is currently private. And then the private company does a reverse merger, and the ticker changes for the SPAC, and it becomes a publicly traded company. And as a result, anyone who is invested in the SPAC gets shares in the new company. So this is one of the biggest ones that we've had. Market cap of $5.84 billion, and I think he's targeting a company worth around $50 billion, if I remember correctly. 20 to 50 billion was something like that. I think he wants somewhere between a 20% stake and a 5% stake in some sort of mature company. So that would put it, that could put it anywhere from 25 million to 50. Or, yeah, no, maybe lower. Can't do math right now, too late. But I have a couple shares I bought a couple months back before this whole SPAC craze really started. I think I bought in at the beginning of December, so we might have been into the SPAC craze a little bit, but I think the floor for this SPAC was $20, if I remember correctly. Might have been $21.60. That's what it looks like, somewhere around there. So we're a couple bucks off NAV, but I feel pretty good about when they announce the target. Assuming they announce a target, I'm sure you will at some point, that we'll see some sort of bump. And if he's targeting a mature company that's pretty large, I may decide to just keep them. But right now I'm kind of playing off the potential hype that we could see if we see a target announced. So next up, this is a little random, but I have a little bit of money in an India ETF. So my thesis here, we've seen a pretty strong performance in the US stock market over the past, I don't even know, 15, 20 years. And I'm sure that will keep going, which is why the most of my money is still in the US markets. But I do think that there is an enormous amount of potential in India. They are soon going to surpass China in population. I believe it's projected in 2025. And I think every year something like 100,000 people living in India are raised out of poverty. And there's a huge amount in the middle class whose average income has gone up every year. So the thesis is that as more and more people come out of poverty, as more people develop in India, a lot of the companies there will begin to thrive, a lot of the sectors there will begin to thrive, and we'll see more economic expansion in India. So I don't know what the time frame on something like this would be. It's definitely going to be a lot longer of a time frame. And the expense ratio is a little higher than I'm used to, 0.69%. But I just have a little money in there as kind of like a speculative play. And I kind of do my core holdings, and then I just pick a couple speculative plays that I think I have faith in that could potentially outperform the market over the next 5-10 years. And that's where I allocate the rest of my money. Watchlist is one that I've talked about on the channel before. I actually did a full video on them if you guys are interested. But they are a fulfillment center REIT. So they maintain triple net leases on a lot of the fulfillment centers used by companies like Amazon, Walmart, BMW, Target, any company you can think of. They probably have at least some portion of their fulfillment flowing through a Prologis fulfillment center. There's actually a couple near me. I'm in New Jersey, and I drive by them on a pretty regular basis. But Prologis is actually one of the larger holders of real estate in the U.S., which is kind of crazy to think about, because they just own so much square footage from the different warehouses that they own across the country, and I believe they're also international. So I own some of them. I've been keeping an eye on them. They haven't really moved too much, which is honestly my chief concern, is that the stock doesn't really do too much. Not really a big enough dividend to justify it either, but I think going forward we'll see a pretty good trend in the e-commerce space like we've been seeing. Next up, we have one of Chamath's SPACs. So this is the Social Capital 5 IPOE, and they have signed a definitive agreement to merge with Sophie, SOFI, which is a financial conglomerate in the making. So this is a centralized financial company that does things like banking, stock trading, retirement plans, anything you can think of finance related that you typically have multiple accounts for. They centralize it, which is kind of their main thesis. And they already have, I believe it's around 1 million active monthly members on it, and they have almost 10 million registered users. So, we're seeing a massive uptrend in the fintech space. This is definitely pretty risky. This is another SPAC, and I did not catch it right off the jump. I got in probably, I have it right here, let me look. I got in with the cost basis around $16. In this window here, it's not refined enough to show it, but you can see it's currently at 2165. It's very, very volatile. It'll easily move plus or minus 10% in a day without any real news. And this is kind of a long-term hold for me. I just bought a little bit of them, looking to see what happens in the future. I think they could turn into a pretty big company. And then the last one I'm going to talk about today is Taiwan Semi. So this is one of my favorite stocks. I've had them in my portfolio as probably my largest holding for the past 6 months or so. And I kind of piled in back in June, July, whenever it was that I think it was around here, when Apple announced that they would be moving their chips over to Apple Silicon. And at the time, it was not yet released who would be making Apple's chips. But I just took the assumption. I did some research and found out that Taiwan Semi had been making the past 2 iterations of Apple's chips for its iPads and iPhones. And I figured it stood to reason that if they were switching to Apple Silicon and they were using a variant of that chip, I believe it was the A14, that they would be using the same manufacturer. And I was correct. So you can see they've had a pretty crazy run over the past 6 months or so. I originally bought in the 50s. I rode it to around the 75 area, and then I sold my shares and bought call options, and then I held those until it got to around 90, 95, and I got scared because I was up so much, so I cashed down on those and went back into stock, and that's where I've been for like the past 2-3 months or so. So I could have had a lot more money, but hindsight's 2020. So currently, I think they make up around 10% of my portfolio, and I'm pretty happy with where that's at. I think potentially the biggest risk for this company is geopolitical. There's been some talks of tension between China and, I guess Taiwan, but we'll see if that actually amounts to anything. They did announce that they're going to be building a site in Arizona that will be manufacturing chips. So not only should that bring some of the manufacturing over into our country and kind of take some edge off in terms of geopolitical danger, but I think that it may convince the U.S. to kind of take up arms for Taiwan if there is a threat, because they're becoming part of the U.S. infrastructure, and if they have issues overseas, it's going to affect the company's U.S. presence and all the jobs it has in the U.S. We also have a massive dependency on chips from especially TSM, also like Samsung and TSM actually make most of the chips for the products you use every day. Companies like AMD, Qualcomm, they don't actually make their own chips. They contract it out because they're fabless fabless companies, which means they don't actually make any of their own chips. They just use architectures designed by other companies and then have them manufactured. So, those are the stocks I have my eye on the most. Let me do one more quick sweep through my watch list. I'm watching a ton more stocks, but most of them are pretty run-of-the-mill. So, SMED is another one that I was in the past and I've kind of gotten out of. But SMED handles disposal of medical waste. So, like the big play right now is the vaccine, and all these syringes that are being used have to be disposed of in a special way. They can't just be tossed in the trash. So, Waste Management and a lot of these other multi-billion-dollar companies have waste disposal for medical. So, this isn't probably the best play for that, but it's the pure play here, because they're purely a medical waste company, and Waste Management and the other players, most of their business doesn't come from that, so it's not really a needle mover. But I did have call options for this company back at the beginning of this month, and I doubled my money and then got out, and I haven't been back in since, just because it's such a small stock. It's only, I bought in 20% ago, so it was like $140 company. So I get really nervous in these really small, tiny companies. So when things go well, I try to get in and out as fast as possible. But I think that's all, guys. Thank you for watching. If you have anything you want me to talk about in specific, drop a comment down below, and I could probably accommodate it. Have a good night, guys. Bye.